topic of my study was a correlation study to look and see if there was a relationship between a supervisor's generational cohort and the work engagement levels in the employees that they supervise. There were a couple different problems driving my research. While this study looked at the multiple generational cohorts, Generation X, baby boomers, and millennials, one of the problems driving the research was that millennials are just now beginning to occupy leadership positions. So there's not a lot of studies done with millennials as leaders in leadership positions. There's a lot of studies about work engagement levels for millennials as employees, the things that drive them as employees, but there's not as them as leaders. So that was the main problem that drove my research because of the lack of scholarly research in this area. And when it comes to work engagement, it's obviously very important for organizations to understand and have the knowledge that they need to increase the work engagement levels within their organization. It's important for members of different generational cohorts to understand work engagement and how to increase work engagement levels. It's also valuable for researchers in management or organizational research to fill the gaps and to increase our knowledge in how we can increase work engagement levels in organizations. It's important to business consultants if they have the knowledge that the scientific backed knowledge that they need, they can go into an organization and be successful and help that organization to turn around the issues that they may be having. It's especially important in the medical and health service area because those individuals are working with patients and they have people's lives in their hands. So if they have low work engagement levels, it can have a significantly bigger impact on the organization, on somebody's life, than it may in other types of organizations. The study needed to be done for several different reasons. As I mentioned previously, organizations have a lot at stake when they have low work engagement levels. They have a lot to gain from increasing their work engagement levels. With the change of pace in technology and everything, it's rapidly evolving. So not only do we not completely understand work engagement to the level that we could, everything is changing so quickly. It changes the dynamics of work engagement and the things that impact work engagement. And so this study was a quantitative, correlational, cross-sectional survey design study. And the reason that I chose a quantitative study is because I wanted to first get an idea of what we were looking at, a broad picture. And then from there, my goal was to be able to dig deeper to find future research initiatives and maybe go into the qualitative aspects a little bit more and dig deeper and ask questions. But to start off with, I just wanted to get the numbers, a big picture, and then choose what research should follow after that. And I chose the correlation study because what I was looking at called for that. I wanted to see if there was a difference between work engagement levels in employees who had a millennial supervisor versus employees that had a baby boomer supervisor or employees that had a Gen X supervisor. So in order to do that, I needed to do a correlation study to see if that relationship existed. During the whole doctoral process, and especially during the dissertation process, I learned a lot of different skills, and some that I think come to you just from doing and you learn. So one of them was about the surveys. As I mentioned, I had 5 different facilities located all around Washington. And what I did is I went to the monthly staff meeting for each facility, and the directors of each facility gave me the opportunity to go over the study, what it entailed, their rights, the informed consent, and then to provide the survey to the employees. And I learned quickly that it was a much higher success rate to have the survey in the beginning of the meeting rather than at the end, because this survey was voluntary and nobody had to take it. And employees were there on their day off for this team meeting. So at the end, when I spoke and I said, this is voluntary, you don't have to stay, people were just ready to go. There was no clear incentive for them that they could see. And so a lot of people just left because they wanted to get out of there. So I feel that if I would have had the survey at the beginning or had my portion at the beginning of the meetings, I would have had a lot more success in the beginning when I started off. I did switch when I got to my last 3 facilities and I went first, and not only did I not have to sit through their meeting and hear kind of some of their confidential probably things that they went through, but I also had a lot better feedback from that. So that was a really good learning lesson. Outside of the technical skills or primary skills that I learned, I'm often asked what has been most beneficial in this doctoral process to me and what has been the most challenging. And it's not the content. The content was not hard to grasp, but there's 2 things that stand out to me and that I have become very, very strong in from this process, and one is resilience. There have been so many different situations that I've had to bounce back from, and that where things did not go as planned, and that especially with the dissertation process, one thing that I never realized is how difficult it would be to get organizations or a group to allow me to use their employees to conduct a study. In my eyes, I always thought, that's great, an organization is getting something for free, they should be happy, but it proved to be much, much more challenging, and I had a lot of setbacks with my dissertation. A lot of people don't understand the process and the rigor that goes into doing a dissertation, and so I had 2 or 3 different situations where organizations had committed and I had written my dissertation, my first 3 chapters, around the areas that they were in, and they backed out after it was done. So it's set me back a lot, and I had to rewrite a lot based on those setbacks. But because of the process, I became very, very resilient. Instead of focusing on the setbacks, I just moved ahead, and I'm finally here. The null hypothesis in this study was that there was not a relationship between the work engagement levels of employees and the supervisor's generational cohort. Unfortunately, the null hypothesis was not rejected in this case, but there were some other interesting findings that came from this research, and one that was that for the respondents, millennials had the lowest mean score of work engagement, and then Generation X had the middle mean score, and baby boomers had the highest levels of work engagement. So as it went up in generation, the work engagement levels went up. The last finding that I found very interesting from this study was that while we were looking at the supervisor's generational cohort, and that didn't seem to show a correlation, what we did find was that there tended to be a correlation between the respondent and their supervisor, as long as the supervisor was in a lower generational cohort. So for example, a baby boomer who was supervised by a millennial, or a Gen Xer who was supervised by a millennial, or a baby boomer who was supervised by a Gen Xer, they had higher levels of work engagement. So it didn't matter what the generational cohort was, but as long as they were in a lower generational cohort, the work engagement levels were higher. So that was another really interesting finding that I found in doing this study. Overall, this has been a very challenging, very expanding, knowledge expanding experience, the doctoral process and the dissertation process. And I've learned a lot, and I'm looking forward to continue learning and continue practicing so that as I continue to research, it's not as challenging moving forward. And I appreciate everybody in the panel that has given their time to review the dissertation and the patience with my schedule and the setbacks that I have had in moving forward. So thank you very, very much, and I look forward to finishing this process with the three of you.